There's a specific kind of fear that doesn't scream. It doesn't announce itself with footsteps or shadows jumping from the dark. It arrives quietly. The moment your body knows something your mind hasn't accepted yet. It's the feeling that makes the hair on your arms lift for no clear reason. The sensation that you're being observed, even though you're sure you're alone. And the slow, creeping realization that whatever is watching you doesn't want to be seen. We grow up afraid of monsters or things hiding under beds or lurking in the woods. But as adults, we learn something far more disturbing. The scariest moments don't come from creatures that don't exist. They come from people who do. People who blend into the dark. People who wait. People who take advantage of quiet places, empty roads, and moments when curiosity overrides caution. Every story you're about to hear begins the same way. Not with danger, but with a decision that felt harmless at the time. A late-night adventure. Accepting help from a stranger. Working alone when nothing ever happened. And in each case, the terror didn't strike all at once. It crept in slowly, through strange details that didn't quite add up, through instincts that whispered instead of shouted, through that awful moment when someone realizes, I'm not alone. Tonight, on Dark, you'll hear 3 true style encounters where ordinary people came face to face with something far worse than imagination. They didn't encounter ghosts or demons. They encountered intent. And each of them walked away knowing one terrifying truth. If they had ignored that feeling for just a few seconds longer, they might not have walked away at all. Most people don't step into danger on purpose. They don't wake up planning to face something that will stay with them for the rest of their lives. More often than not, it starts with a choice so small it barely feels like one at all. Staying out a little later than planned. Taking a shortcut. Saying yes when instinct quietly suggests saying no. These are the moments we brush off because nothing bad has happened before. Because we've done it 100 times and walked away just fine. Because danger, we believe, announces itself loudly. But real horror doesn't work that way. It slips in through routine, through boredom, through curiosity mixed with confidence. Each story you're about to hear began with someone thinking, what's the worst that could happen? None of them expected fear to follow. None of them believed that one ordinary decision would place them in the path of someone else's hidden intentions. And that's what makes these encounters so unsettling. Not the darkness, not the setting, but sometimes all it takes is stepping a little too far off the familiar path. Sometimes it's trusting the wrong person for just a moment too long. And sometimes it's ignoring that quiet inner voice because it feels inconvenient. On Darrkpulz, these are the stories that linger long after the night is over. Stories that remind us fear isn't always a weakness. Sometimes it's the only thing trying to keep us alive. Boredom is a dangerous thing back in college. I shared a cramped apartment with my closest friend. For privacy's sake, I'll call him Evan. We weren't reckless in the dramatic, headline-making way, but we had a talent for bad ideas. The kind that sound exciting when you're young, bored, and convinced you're invincible. We fed off each other's impulsiveness. One of us would suggest something stupid, and the other would be halfway out the door before thinking it through. Sneaking into abandoned buildings, climbing places we absolutely shouldn't have, exploring areas clearly marked. No trespassing just to say we did it. None of it felt dangerous at the time. It felt like freedom. Looking back, I realized boredom was our biggest motivator. We hated routine. Quiet nights felt wasted. If there was a fence, we wondered what was on the other side. If there was a place everyone avoided, that only made it more interesting to us. We weren't thrill-seekers chasing adrenaline for the rush alone. We wanted stories, moments we could laugh about later, proof that we'd lived a little louder than everyone else around us. And for the most part, our stupidity never caught up with us until one night, when curiosity led us somewhere we'd never been before, somewhere people didn't talk about, somewhere even locals avoided without really explaining why. At the time, it felt like just another harmless adventure. Another memory in the making. We didn't know we were about to step into a situation that would strip away that careless confidence in a matter of minutes and replace it with a kind of fear neither of us had ever felt before. The forgotten edge of town the town we lived in wasn't large, but it had a strange layout. Woods surrounded it on nearly every side, thick and quiet, like a boundary no one bothered to question. Most of those wooded areas were normal enough parks, trails, places people walked dogs or went jogging during the day. But there was one side of town that felt different. No street lights, no homes that looked lived in. No reason to go there unless you had to. Decades earlier, a massive fire had torn through that section, wiping out entire blocks. What was never rebuilt was simply left behind. Burned foundations, cracked roads leading nowhere, empty lots where houses once stood. Over time, nature reclaimed everything. Trees grew where driveways used to be. Brush swallowed sidewalks whole. Beyond that abandoned stretch was the forest itself, dense, unmarked and untouched. No trails, no signs, just a wall of trees that seemed to absorb sound. People didn't warn you about that place directly. They didn't say it was dangerous or cursed. They just never talked about it. And whenever it came up, conversation shifted away naturally, like everyone had silently agreed it wasn't worth mentioning. That unspoken avoidance was exactly what drew us in. We told ourselves it made sense. If no one went there, then it must be quiet, empty, boring, even. Compared to the stunts we'd pulled before, walking through the woods at night felt tame. So we packed 2 flashlights and left campus after dark, cutting through the sleeping town. The farther we walked, the quieter everything became. Traffic noise faded. Porch lights disappeared. Even the air felt heavier. By the time we reached the burned-out section, It felt like we'd crossed into a place forgotten by time, and when we stepped past it, into the trees beyond, the town vanished completely behind us. That should have been the moment we turned around. Instead, we clicked on our flashlights and walked deeper into the dark. A light that shouldn't be there at first. Nothing happened. The woods were exactly what you'd expect: tall trees, uneven ground, and the soft crunch of leaves under our shoes. Our flashlights cut narrow tunnels through the darkness, illuminating trunks and low branches before fading into blackness again. After the initial rush of stepping into the unknown wore off, the forest felt almost ordinary. Too ordinary. We walked for a while without speaking much, listening to the distant sounds of night insects and the occasional rustle of something small moving through the brush. No structures, no markings, no signs that anyone else had ever been out there. I remember starting to think the whole trip was a waste of time. That's when Evan stopped walking. He raised his hand slightly and tilted his head forward. "Do you see that?" he whispered. "At first, I didn't. Then, through the gaps between the trees, I noticed it's a thin beam of light cutting low across the forest floor in the distance. It wasn't flickering like firelight. It wasn't soft or natural. It was clean, artificial. A flashlight." We stood there staring, both of us, trying to make sense of it. The light wasn't moving. It wasn't swinging or scanning. It just sat there, glowing steadily near the ground, as if someone had set it down and walked away. The closer we got, the stranger it felt. There was no backpack, no footprints we could see, no sound of voices or movement nearby. Just a single flashlight resting on the dirt, switched on, shining into nothing. Electric flashlights don't last forever. Someone had been holding it recently, probably within the last hour, and yet whoever it belonged to was completely gone. For a moment, we joked about it. Nervous humor. Maybe someone dropped it and didn't realize, but deep down, neither of us believed that you don't lose a light in pitch-black woods without noticing. Not unless you're distracted or scared. The idea settled into my stomach like a cold weight. If someone had been running, what were they running from? I felt that quiet warning crawl up my spine. Same instinct that tells you when something isn't right. That should have been enough. We should have turned back right then. Instead, we left the flashlight exactly where it was and walked past it deeper into the trees, not knowing we'd just crossed a line we couldn't uncross. Footsteps without a face. We didn't make it far. Maybe a minute or two after leaving the flashlight behind, the forest changed. Not in any visible way, but in the way it felt. The air seemed heavier, like sound didn't travel the same anymore. Our footsteps felt louder, sharper, echoing in a way they hadn't before. Then came the noise, a sudden crack followed by another. 3 or 4 sharp snaps in quick succession. It came from behind us. Both of us spun around at the same time, flashlights sweeping wildly across the trees. The beams bounced off trunks and low branches, casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Nothing. No animals. No people. No explanation. We stood there, listening, hearts thudding in our ears. After a few seconds of silence, we told ourselves it was probably nothing. A deer. A falling branch. Anything but what our instincts were screaming. So we kept walking. 5 minutes later, it happened again. This time, it was closer. Much closer. The sound wasn't just branches snapping, it was movement. Fast. Low to the ground, like someone trying to stay quiet and failing. I could feel Evan tense beside me. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The excitement we'd felt earlier was gone, replaced by something colder and sharper. Fear. We stopped again, scanning the darkness. Our flashlights felt weak now, barely pushing back the shadows. Once more, there was nothing to see, but the silence that followed felt wrong. From that point on, the noises didn't stop. Every few minutes, the same pattern repeated, quick movement behind us, always just out of sight. Never in front. Never where we could catch it in the light. Whoever or whatever it was, wasn't trying to pass us. It was following. The realization hit me all at once. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This wasn't a thrill. Someone was back there, matching our pace, waiting. And the worst part was the restraint. If they wanted us to know they were there, they would have stepped into the light. Instead, they stayed hidden, and that told us everything we needed to know. The shape behind the tree, it happened so suddenly that my mind struggled to process it. We'd just heard the movement again, closer than before when Evan's flashlight froze in place. I followed his gaze, my chest tightening as I slowly raised my own light toward the same spot. For the first time all night, the darkness didn't stay empty. At the edge of our beams, something shifted. Not a trick of shadows, not branches swaying. A shape moved, smooth and deliberate, slipping behind the thick trunk of a tree no more than 30 feet away. We didn't run right away. We stood there, completely still, as if moving would somehow make it worse. My pulse hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. The forest felt impossibly quiet, like it was holding its breath with us. Seconds passed. Then, from behind the tree, a head slowly leaned out, just enough for us to see the outline. Just enough to confirm it wasn't an animal. Whoever it was didn't rush, didn't lunge. They simply watched us, studied us. The stillness of it was more terrifying than any sudden movement could have been. That was the moment panic finally took over. I shouted without meaning to, and we both turned and ran. No plan, no direction, just pure instinct driving our legs as we crashed through branches and uneven ground, flashlights bouncing uselessly in our hands. We didn't look back. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs begged us to stop. When we finally slowed down, the only sounds were our ragged breathing and the distant pounding of our own footsteps echoing in our heads. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We knew the truth now. We hadn't imagined anything. We hadn't overreacted. And we hadn't been alone in those woods. We walked the rest of the way back toward town with our lights dimmed, afraid to draw attention to ourselves. Every shadow felt like it could break loose and chase us again. And when the town lights finally reappeared through the trees, relief washed over us, but it didn't erase the feeling that something had been watching us leave. Something that had let us go. What was missing when we returned? We didn't talk much on the walk back. Every sound made us flinch. Every snap of a twig felt like it could be the start of another chase. Even once we reached the edge of the abandoned area, neither of us fully relaxed. The fear clung to us, refusing to fade just because the woods were behind us. It wasn't until we were nearly back in town that Evan slowed to a stop. "Did you notice something?" he asked quietly. I followed his gaze back toward the tree line. The flashlight, the one we'd found earlier, it was gone. We hadn't passed it on the way back. There was no beam cutting through the darkness, no soft glow on the forest floor. Someone had returned for it, turned it off, taken it away. Neither of us said what we were thinking, but we both felt it. Whoever had been following us wasn't just wandering aimlessly. They'd been close enough to retrieve it after we fled, close enough to watch us leave. Back on campus, the night felt surreal, like everything was pretending to be normal when we knew better. We didn't report anything. What would we even say? That we'd been stalked by a shadow in the woods? That we'd ignored every warning sign? A few days later, though, the town buzzed with quiet concern. A person had been reported missing, last seen heading toward the far side of town. There were no details, no confirmation. Just a vague announcement that left too much unsaid. We never found out if it was connected. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was coincidence. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that flashlight, about the restraint, about the way that figure had watched us instead of chasing. And I wonder what we might have stumbled into that night, and whether leaving when we did was the only reason we were able to tell this story at all. Stranded between nowhere and nowhere a few years after that night in the woods, I found myself alone on the road. This time for reasons that felt far more ordinary. I was in the middle of a long-distance move, driving inland from the coast with the last of my belongings packed tightly into the trunk. I'd made the trip before, enough times that the scenery no longer impressed me. Endless stretches of trees, small towns, separated by miles of nothing, and roads that felt forgotten once the sun went down. That night, I pushed myself too hard. After driving all day, I pulled into a quiet town just before evening and took a short nap in my car. When I woke up, it was dark, close to 9. I figured I'd knock out a few more hours and stop again later. About an hour after leaving town, my dashboard lit up like it was warning me of something catastrophic. One light, then another. Then the steering began to feel wrong-heavy, unresponsive, like the car was fighting me. I barely made it to the shoulder before stopping. Gravel crunched under my tires as I shut the engine off and sat there, staring at the windshield. The road was empty in both directions. No service, no nearby exits. Just trees lining the asphalt like walls. I stepped out and walked around the car, pretending I knew what I was looking for. I didn't. Everything looked fine, which somehow made it worse. That's when I really noticed where I was. Dim streetlights spaced far apart. Forest stretching endlessly into the dark. No wind. No animals. No sound at all. I remember thinking, almost laughing to myself, that it felt like the opening scene of a horror movie. And like every bad decision before it, the situation didn't feel dangerous yet. Just inconvenient. I leaned against the first offer after what felt like forever. Headlights finally appeared in the distance. I waved, hoping someone would stop. A car slowed and pulled up beside me. A man leaned out the window, mid-30s rough-looking with a cigarette dangling from his lips. His eyes scanned me carefully, like he wasn't sure if he should trust what he saw. "Everything okay?" he asked, voice cautious. I explained the car trouble, keeping it short. He nodded slowly, taking in my words and my presence, then hesitated. "Well, Lopin, I can give you a lift to the next town," he offered. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Something about it felt off in a way my gut screamed at me. I paused. My instincts shouted no. My mind tried to rationalize it. He's just helping. But every part of me tensed. "I actually have a friend on the way," I said, forcing casual confidence. "Should be here any minute." He smirked, not friendly, not amused, a smirk that felt like a warning. Without another word, he hit the gas and vanished down the dark stretch of road. I watched him disappear, my heart racing. That brief encounter had confirmed everything. My gut had been whispering, this road, this night, it was dangerous. And yet, that would only be the beginning. The real danger was still coming.